Unprecedented scenes unfolded in America's capital city, Washington, on Wednesday, with violence, vandalism, tear gas and bullets being fired to quell a raging mob composed largely of Trump supporters, all who had gathered by the thousands and broke police cordons at the Capitol building in D.C. to disrupt the ceremonial counting of votes that confirmed U.S. President-elect Joe Biden's win. Rioters overwhelmed the Capitol Police and stormed the Congress building. The largely pro-Trump mob tried to interrupt the certification of Joe Biden's Electoral College win, but the interruption threw the U.S. Capitol into a deadly spiral of chaos and violence. Several House buildings had to be evacuated due to the potential bomb threats. Vice President Mike Pence was also pulled from the Senate chamber, with the situation having spun quickly out of control. Protesters breached the Capitol, entering the Senate chamber and streaming through Statutory Hall. Now, one man sat in the very seat that Pence had been sitting in just a few minutes before, while another posed in Speaker Nancy Pelosi's office. Lawmakers, reporters and staffers sheltered throughout the building as pro-Trump rioters banged on doors and shouted slogans. At one point, gunfire was heard inside the Capitol as police officers barricaded the doors to the House chamber. Now, police later confirmed one woman was shot, although the specific circumstances of that shooting have yet to be released. The woman reportedly succumbed to the injuries in hospital, and 3 others died in the violence too. Tear gas was deployed and an improvised explosive device was found on the Capitol grounds. By mid-afternoon, the National Guard was finally called up to help suppress the unrest, nearly 2 hours after the first reports of a breach. At least 52 people have been arrested so far. Now, what unfolded at the Capitol on Wednesday was a result of months of Trump's tweets meant to incite the most violent among his base, with the final clarion call in a speech right before the violence erupted. Listen to this.
All of us here today do not want to see our election victory stolen by emboldened radical left Democrats, which is what they're doing, and stolen by the fake news media. That's what they've done and what they're doing. We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved. Our country has had enough. We will not take it anymore, and that's what this is all about.
World leaders, NATO chief and Donald Trump's own team members reacted to the brazen display of anarchy on American soil. Members of the U.S. Congress also called on Trump to stop the rioters. After much chaos and violence, Trump said this.
This was a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special. You've seen what happens. You see the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil. I know how you feel, but go home and go home in peace.
President-elect Joe Biden described the chaos as, quote, an unprecedented assault of American undertakings. He also said that the authorities struggled to take control of a chaotic situation at the Capitol that led to the evacuation of lawmakers.
Let me be very clear. The scenes of chaos at the Capitol do not reflect a true America, do not represent who we are. What we're seeing are a small number of extremists dedicated to lawlessness. This is not dissent. It's disorder. It's chaos. It borders on sedition. And it must end now.
VOA's diplomatic correspondent Cindy Sain joins us live for more on this. Good evening. Thank you for being with us. Now, the world has been watching in shock and horror as the Capitol was stormed by the protesters who had been incited by the outgoing president. What is the latest that you have for us there? Cindy, I'll repeat the question. I'm not sure if you can hear me. The world has been watching as the Capitol was stormed by these protesters. What are the latest details that you have for us coming out of the US?
Yes, I can hear you now. And yes, Washington is waking up to a lot of questions today. People are asking how it could be that the Capitol Police were not able to keep these hordes of protesters out. Some people are pointing out discrepancies between the way that Black Lives Matters protesters over the summer, that they were tear gas and there were rubber bullets shot against them. And so there's all kinds of questions. And also, of course, the role of President Trump himself, because he had called for people to converge on the city on the day that Congress was to do its constitutional duty and certify Joe Biden as the next president of the United States. And the president had spoken to the demonstrators before this violence occurred. So there's all sorts of questions. It feels a little bit like the quiet after the storm. It looks, as far as I can tell, as if both the House and the Senate have adjourned. But there are some questions, and the president is now temporarily banned from Facebook and Instagram. So it feels, we've said this several times, but it feels like uncharted territory.
Right, on that uncharted territory, there are calls for the 25th Amendment to be instituted. What is the likelihood of this taking place?
Right, and if there are efforts on that, they are very much going on, mostly behind the scenes. We have had the first Republican lawmaker, Representative Adam Kinzinger, who is an Iraq war veteran, who has spoken up and called for President Trump to be removed, saying that he is a national security threat. And that's what many people are saying. It wasn't just in the U.S. Capitol, in other capitals around the country, in a number of states, from Alaska to Pennsylvania. There were also Trump supporters who gathered and converged on state houses, some of them armed. So the FBI is investigating what happened at the U.S. Capitol. So there are very real national security concerns, especially with the inauguration coming up in about 2 weeks' time.
Absolutely, Cindy. And the ceremonial counting of votes that confirms U.S. President-elect Joe Biden's win has been certified, and he will be sworn in on the 20th of January. Can you take us through the next step in that regard?
Yes, you're right. We will likely be hearing from President-elect Biden later today, and he will be introducing his new Attorney General, and of course, which is thought to be Merrick Garland. The Attorney General will have an even greater role to play, because there will likely be investigations into what happened at the Capitol, and the role of the president and the role of some Republican senators and members of Congress who were planning, and some who actually did, question the validity of the election. So it looks like we are set for the inauguration to happen, but there's a lot of questions about the violence that happened, and that we had hordes in the inside the U.S. Capitol, place where I worked for many years, and as you know, is a beacon for democracy around the world.
Right, Cindy, thank you very much for bringing us all the latest there out of Washington, D.C. WION, now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.